Hi, this is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in to Simply Enough.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period. Welcome to Simply Enough, where we celebrate you.
Because you are enough. Just as you are.
Period.
The idea of quitting a relationship, that kept coming up. I want to dig into that a little bit today.
Let's do it.
But also how hard it was to walk away from somebody. I've got this belief that good friend means something, and the label of a good friend, and it was all this standard, this label that I wanted to hold myself to.
That's literally what goes on in our head. What matters more is what they think of me. That external value matters more to me than what I think of myself.
Wait a minute. Little sirens like, Maha.
Because when we don't feel that we're enough, we feel that we get our worth, our value by being of service and by giving.
That message needs to be heard again to help them find the enoughness to stand up and say no.
The deal friends benefit most when you don't have boundaries.
So rewind, listen to Elizabeth again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
And here we go.
Never fails the giggles.
If anything, we are predictable and consistent. You know, I don't know. I find it fun that when we start these episodes, we do get a little bit of the butterflies, that little bit of nervous, like, oh, here we go. We're starting another episode, you know, but that's also just who we are. Like,
it's just who we are.
We're fun, joyful people.
And that's okay.
Oh, it's more than okay. I'm friends with you. It's more than okay. So our previous episode, we were really looking at letting go versus quitting, and the grace to walk away, that the grace that you embody when you walk away. And you talked about the canary in the coal mine. And in thinking about that, I want to share a story as it pertains to the idea of letting go. I had to walk away from a friendship recently, and you know, I'm such a romantic in many ways, and I enter people's lives believing that I'm going to be in their life forever. And then I stop and think, well, that's not true. But there is that kind of like hopeless romantic, like, you know, this person's going to be with me forever and I'm going to be with them forever. And then as you get older, I don't know, you start to realize that there are times and places for relationships. And that doesn't lessen the value of the relationship. Some of the people that I've just absolutely adored, like from college, you know, our lives just took us in different directions. And there's a natural ebb and flow of life that I think does that organically. And then with this particular friendship, it wasn't a result of life. It was, oh no, this is a relationship that I have to walk away from.
It was a recognition, and it was a choice.
And I want to get into that a little bit today, because, you know, we were looking at careers or things like that last episode, and then just reflecting on the episode and how much I struggled leaving a person, and the idea of quitting a relationship. That kept coming up as I was listening and editing the episode. So I want to dig into that a little bit today.
Let's do it. Do it. Yeah.
So with this particular friendship, you know, this is somebody I really cared about, and I think that there were a whole number of indicators that potentially this wasn't the relationship that I thought it was. That, you know, that it wasn't a friendship that was serving both people, and then over time, it started to become quite apparent that that wasn't the case. But, you know, I've got this belief that good friend means something, right? And now I'm starting to put meaning on what a good friend is and the label of a good friend. And it was all this standard that I wanted to hold myself to, and this label that I wanted to hold myself to. And yet there was part of me that also recognized that maybe this relationship was not what was serving me, and was actually, I was making choices to cast the other person as the leading player in my story, you know, if we're going back to a previous episode. the part that I in listening to our previous episode and thinking about this relationship was just how relevant our topics have been, but also how hard it was to walk away from somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and how I did put meaning on the idea of being a quitter, quote unquote, and how I felt like at the time that I was quitting a relationship. So I just, I bring that up today as a listener myself of our own podcast,
Mm-hmm.
that I suspect maybe some of our other listeners, separate from a job or a career path or any similar example that we brought up last week, might also be in a similar position with a friendship or some other kind of relationship in their life, where they may struggle like I did, thinking about these labels that they put meaning on about themselves as it pertains to a relationship that may actually not be good for them, and then struggling with quitting versus letting go of a relationship. So I put that out for us today.
Well, I mean, it's important, in anything and everything we do, to be mindful and present of any situation that we're in or any environment that we're in, and that includes a relationship. And sometimes, relationships with a P are relationships with a T, and friendships are friendships with a T. And it all depends on whether you can ascertain, are they real friends or are they deal friends? So I don't know of whom you're speaking, but if in any way I could guess, speaking from my own personal experience as well, relative to real friends versus deal friends, is this someone that you felt you were constantly kind of having to give, and the other was quite the taker, and it wasn't quite reciprocal? And life doesn't have to be an even balance every time. Right. I mean, they're just like seasons in life. There are going to be times in a relationship where one necessarily gives more than the other, but over the whole friendship with a P and relationship with a P, everything balances out. When one is in an imbalanced relationship or a friendship, then those are the deal friends, where it's all about what can you do for that person. And sometimes we as the people pleasers are the ones that actually perpetuate that dynamic, because when we don't feel that we're enough, we feel that we get our worth and we feel that we get our value by being of service and by giving. But it's important when you're in those types of friendships where you recognize, the people, the deal friends benefit most when you don't have boundaries. So it's the lack of boundaries that is keeping the deal friend around, because you are providing something for that friend. And when you hold your ground and maintain your boundaries, that's when they get upset and they, threaten the friendship and question the relationship. But that's because there's an imbalance there, and they're benefiting off of your placing them on a pedestal and you're taking the one down stance. But that's not a true relationship, and that's not a true friendship. And it's okay to recognize that. And sometimes what we have to do is actually weed the garden, meaning, look at the relationships that are flourishing and help you flourish versus where are the weeds. I have, I'm going to presume they're not listening to this podcast. I have many a deal friend, and they think that I don't recognize this, but I do, in that I don't hear from them until they need an appointment with me in my, to see a doctor or, and I love the bubbly preface, having not heard from them in like a year. Hi, Elizabeth, how, in the text, the long preface of, hi, how are you? It's been so long. How have you been? Hope things are going well. By the way, can you squeeze me in, and I don't begrudge that, because I love what I do. And I truly believe that, God gifted me this vocation so as to be service to others. But I also have come to recognize that I don't confuse that for true friends.
And I think I
That makes
did.
sense.
It totally makes sense, because the natural tendency that I have to want to take care of somebody and also give to them and show them that I care about them and show that they mean in my life, like they are meaning in my life. I think that part of me that always wanted to show up anytime that, hey, I need this, or can you do this, or was like, yes, because I want to do that for you. And yet there were little like instincts or little things on, like, that were
red flags.
yes, that were going off in me, little sirens, like, wait a minute, that time when you texted them or called them and said, hey, are you free? I really just need somebody to talk, and silence or a no. And again, it doesn't always have to be a tit for tat, a one for one, but there was such an imbalance. And yet I kind of put that aside when the message came in, like, hey, can you be here at this time to help me? Yes, I can be there, Bob. And I was there. So like internally, I had that little indicator that was like, yeah, wait a minute, check this relationship might not be, a natural ebb and flow, give and take. But the minute that text would come in, like you're talking about, I was like, I'm there. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. That little inkling that you're feeling is that inner GPS, that still small voice that we are so quick to dismiss. And especially if we have lived our lives actually coming from a place of not enoughness. What I mean by that is a friend of mine, actually, she's so astute. It's amazing. She pointed out, because I was talking to her about how a deal I now recognize as a deal friend as opposed to a real friend. A deal friend, texted and asked a favor. And not only did I rise to that occasion, but I went above and beyond and like just orchestrated more than even what this deal friend asked. And my wise, sage, astute friend said, "You're always doing that."
Yep.
And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You're always doing that. You're especially doing that for this deal friend, but you kind of are always doing that for everybody." And I said, "Well, I pride myself on that. I truly believe, God has blessed me so as to be blessings to others." And she said, "You can be a blessing to others and you can be of service without always taking the one down position." And I said, at the time, I'm like, "I still don't really understand what you mean." And she said, "When you come from a place of not enoughness, then you are hoping and wanting to be chosen. Pick me, pick me. Almost like, oh, the cool friend is letting you sit with them in the cafeteria. Pick me, choose me, choose me. And especially when you come from a place of not enoughness, you feel almost that you can't be chosen just for you. You have to prove that you're worthy of being chosen by some service that you can provide.
Yeah.
And so once you are deigned to be allowed to do a favor, isn't that ironic? Like, please let me do a favor for you. But that's actually what people pleasers end up doing, is please let me do a favor for you. And then because we were chosen to be allowed to do a favor, we then feel, I'm going to even go above and beyond. So they're really going to like me. And that's really going to cement this friendship. And yes, in doing so, not only did we grant the favor, but in going above and beyond, maybe that did seemingly seal the deal. Certainly in with deal friends, not real friends, that seals the deal. And, we might even get, love and hugs and gratitude and invitations and inclusion and all this kind of stuff. But the funny thing is my wise friend said, when you keep doing that. And the thing is, when you keep doing that, going above and beyond, that above and beyondness is actually coming from a not enoughness, because when you keep doing that, that then becomes the expectation. And the more and more you do it, because it's expected, you don't get the positive affirmations from doing so because it's now expected. And if you hold your boundary and don't do the favor and don't go even further above and beyond, then actually you've disappointed the deal friend, and now you're feeling worse about that. So you're still going to go above and beyond. But the irony is, from this place of not enoughness and from this place of enabling and perpetuating this dynamic, it gets to a point where, again, because it's expected, you do the above and beyondness, and yet you don't get the love and the accolades and the gratitude. So then it's a double whammy against me, because now I'm not feeling accepted and I'm not feeling appreciated. So there's a little bit of resentment there. But then there's also a little bit of guilt because I take my identity from going above and beyond, like that's some medal of honor, when really it's actually just perpetuating the dynamic and harming me. And in perpetuating the dynamic, you know, it's not even recognized or appreciated by the deal friend anymore.
Yeah,
it all comes from a place of not enoughness.
And I will say, you know, in a previous episode, we talked about standing up, no longer being a doormat. And what is so fascinating about what you're saying is that really was the dynamic of this friendship. So without having shared many details about it, like you're spot on. And even more so, as I started to put up those boundaries, that was when I wasn't ready for all of the tactics coming at me about, you know, the gaslighting and the manipulation and some of those like really strong tactics that the good example was, well, you only show up when there's an emergency, like you're not there all the time. And then it's like, oh, that's not true, as if, and now that defense of like, okay, well then I'm going to resume all of the behaviors and patterns and activities and everything that I had been doing to
not only resume, but prove and defend.
Yes, I was just to prove, no, you're right. As if what, no, you're wrong. As if what they started with was actually true, which it wasn't. And that I didn't even recognize that once I started to put that boundary up, that there were going to be strategies, tactics, you know, efforts to resume that really that imbalance pattern that we fell into. And it was incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah. The deal friends are the ones that take the most offense to your authentically setting up boundaries, because they're the ones that had the most to gain when you didn't have boundaries. So it's so funny that the deal friends can almost point to you and say, Zachary, you're being so selfish. Like, why aren't you doing this for me? Yet if you actually step back and look at the whole scenario, okay, who's being the selfish one? The deal friend is calling you selfish for not doing what they want you to do. Isn't that selfish of them? So, and the thing too is, you know, like I was talking about how the dynamic morphs, where at first when you're like, oh, this great friend that I'm going to be friends with for my lifetime, and it's romanticized and it's idealized and they're up on this pedestal and you feel selected and chosen and a part of, you know, a particular group now and everything like that. But then the more and more that you give and give and give, and they take and take, and gets used to taking and taking and taking, not only do you get depleted, right? And that's where we talk about, you know, pouring from an empty cup, as opposed to filling your cup and then overflowing to others. They're just taking, and you're pouring from an empty cup, but also it's less appreciated. So you feel like you have to give more. And when sometimes you do try to set up a boundary, sometimes what the deal friends do is that, yes, they'll accuse you, but other times they're like, ooh, I think Zachary really needs it this time. So now they're going to throw some breadcrumbs at you. Like, ooh, stick with me. Here's some breadcrumbs. When you deserve the whole freaking loaf. And actually you deserve the whole bakery, but they throw out these breadcrumbs of like, stick with me, all is well. And that's a form of conditioning, and that's a form of training and a form of grooming.
Mhm.
And, you know, that's where recognizing your environment, whether it's a workplace situation or
Mhm.
whether it's a boss or whether it's a friendship or whether it's a
Mhm.
relationship, recognize the environment that you're in, weed the garden, let go.
Yeah. It's funny. We've talked about children as being just with this uncanny ability to like distill these kinds of adult experiences down to like a simple and almost just beautifully honest and direct interpretation. So let me give you an example of, I just remembered this right now. When I taught kindergarten in New York City, I would set up every Friday would be investigation centers time, and it was really structured play. On Fridays, each of the different activities, if there was like a student that got to be like the captain of that activity, they got to invite a friend if they wanted to join them for that activity. That wasn't every day that we did investigation centers, just on the Fridays. And one of the students, at like the third or fourth time, when it was her turn to be in the dramatic play area. So this is where they had scarves and clothing and like nondescript toys and whatnot, so they could build a pirate ship, or they could build, a fairy house, they could build a supermarket, whatever, it didn't matter. And it was their time to kind of act it out. And depending on the level of the drama that they had created, we would watch them. Like they would say, okay, we're ready with our play. And then the whole class would come and watch. Okay. So dramatic play was very fun. And I'm not going to lie, it was fun for me too. Right. So I'm like, I want to be a character in it. Anyway. So this one particular girl, she got to be the captain a couple times. It was just luck of the draw. And her friend, well, this other student, was always kind of lobbying to be with the captain when she was the captain for dramatic play, but not really any of the other time. And I could tell at this one particular day that they were having a really hard time in the dramatic play area. Like it just wasn't as seamless as it usually was. So I pulled him over. I'm like, just, what's going on? And the girl just beautifully said, it seems like you only want to be my friend when it benefits you and you want to be in the dramatic play center.
Wow.
6 years old.
Wow.
She had already picked
She
up
will
that
be the
pattern.
president of the United States in how many decades? Well done. Well done, mama.
Right?
Wow.
And just how incredibly articulate, and she spoke from an I feel statement, and yet she had already been able to put up a boundary and say, this is what it feels like to me and I don't like it. 6 years old. Let's get her on the podcast.
Right?
Because
she hadn't learned the fear yet of what is everybody going to think.
Yeah.
And she hasn't learned the fear yet of what is everybody going to say. She just listened to that inner GPS of hers that we have learned to disregard. So she listened to that inner GPS, that little, inkling, I think is what you called it, of this doesn't feel right. This, doesn't feel fair. And I'm just going to speak my truth.
Yeah. Can I share just something kind of cute for a second?
Yeah, please do.
That little inkling, that inner GPS that you talk about in American Sign Language. And this is a plug to go check us out on YouTube, because I'm going to do something visual again. Not quite
as colorful
as the other time.
Not quite as uplifting as the other thing we learned. Wink, wink, everybody.
That was really good. Masterful. So it'll be a little hard to see because it's actually supposed to hit your rib cage. But if you take kind of just a regular hand, like the number 5, but you put your fingers together and you flip your hand over, kind of like you're maybe scooping food into your mouth, but you take that and you kind of poke yourself in the ribs. That is the ASL sign for like instinct or gut telling you something.
You're kidding.
No. And what I love about it is it literally is a physical, it's a physical representation of that feeling that just kind of tugs at us. Right. And they captured it, I think, beautifully, that inkling, that inner GPS, that's just a little bit of a reminder. close to your soul, right? It's not
Yes.
in your head,
No,
right?
it's not.
It's actually, I mean, you could probably put it in your heart, but it really is
Mhm.
saying in the center of your body,
Mhm.
there's something telling you that it needs to be looked at, or
Eh,
there's, you know,
Absolutely. And sometimes the only way that things like, we're going to get woo woo a little bit. Sometimes the only way that things like energy can be perceived by a human is actually by physical
Mhm.
sensation. So that's why the butterflies in the
Oh
stomach,
yeah.
the sweaty palms, all of that manifests physically. So the inner GPS can be, in fact, something physical feeling
Mhm.
and tactile and tangible.
Mhm.
Thank you actually for that's amazing. Thank you
Isn't
for
it?
sharing that.
Yeah. And I will say, my inner GPS was going off long before any awareness that I needed to walk away from this relationship. It really was. And I just kept turning it off.
It always does. And it especially it's just amazing. I mean, that's why if we sometimes our busyness and our intelligence and our ability to rationalize really discounts and dismisses that still small voice and that inner GPS, yet it's always there.
Mhm.
So many people recognize that after the fact of the hurt that they've put themselves through by not listening to that inner GPS and rationalizing it away, excusing it, and especially people pleasers because, you know, um, there's the inner GPS, but there's also the itty bitty shitty committee in our minds, which is like, well, I'm not enough, and now
Yeah.
they're letting me do them a favor, and so now they're gonna like me because they're letting me do them a favor. I
Yeah.
mean, what kind of bullshit comment is that? But that's literally
Yeah.
what goes on in our
Yeah.
head. Yay, they texted me so that I can do them a favor. Oh, they
Yeah.
thought to turn to me. Wow, now I can earn my worth and earn my value and prove my value to them of what a good friend I could be. And not only am I going to grant them this favor, I'm going to go above and beyond, and I'm going to keep doing it. And then they're going to get used to it, and then they're going to take it for granted. But by that point, I am so enmeshed and entangled that my worth is wrapped up into this, that now I perpetuate it. And even though I have this little feeling of resentment in me because it's not appreciated, still what matters more is what they think of me. That external value matters more to me than what I think of myself and what I value of myself. And so I'm going to dismiss my inner GPS and I'm going to go by their voices of what I'm worth to them.
Okay, listeners, pause, rewind, just listen to that again. I'm not being patronizing or condescending.
I know.
You really captured that and just channeled a very, very strong message. And you know, there's still, God, here I go crying. You know, probably 2 or 3 years beyond the time that I when I look back and I'm like, why did I wait so long? Or what took me so long? And there was that, like, quote unquote loss of time. It doesn't really matter. That, what you just said, I knew many, many years ago. And I imagine for at least one of our listeners, that message needs to be heard again so that it can sink in and it can connect with their inner GPS, maybe cerebrally down to their core and their soul, to help them find the strength or courage or whatever, the enoughness to stand up and say no. So rewind, listen to Elizabeth again. Do it. Holy shit. That was powerful.
You are worthy, you have value, you are enough just as you are. And in we talked about this in a previous episode, in the need to defend and in the need to prove, that is putting the power in the other person whenever you have to defend or whenever you have to prove.
And I will tell
Because
you,
that's a reaction.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but
No.
that's a reaction to them, as opposed to first sitting with yourself, listening to your inner GPS, and then coming from your own place, you are responding as opposed to reacting. And then it becomes your owned choice, your owned decision, your owned feelings. You own yourself. Nobody else owns you.
Girl.
I don't know if that resonates with anybody else, but I know it resonates with the two of us. So
hey, it's a win, right?
Time well spent.
Wish I could put you in my pocket, right? Just a little Elizabeth in my pocket right here.
I just, my mouth opens just because that's what started my coaching business, is because I had a number of patients and friends that said that exact statement. That is so funny. That is so funny.
I thank you for really coaching us today. I mean, really, truthfully, what you said was incredibly spot on. And I think it bears quite a few listens, because you were in such a place of clarity and connection and okay. For me, the idea of walking away from a relationship seems much harder, quote unquote, than walking away from a job or walking away for something else.
Of course.
So for anybody that is in that kind of place, just go back and listen to that again. And then fast forward through my little kind of like reminder to listen to it again, and listen to the part about anything about being the owned part, the owned behavior.
It gets a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but it gets a little bit more objective when we realize, and when you realize, again, you're not quitting like in our last episode, and you're not even letting go of a relationship. You're letting go of a relationship, or you're letting go of a friendship, or you're letting go of a deal friend, not a real friend. And I don't mean to say that to vilify the other person or vilify the relationship, because as is everything in life, or most things in life, I should say, it's not an all or nothing. So of course, no doubt there were wonderful things within that, even though it's a relationship, there were wonderful things there. And even deal friends can be fun. And even deal friends from time to time can be there for you and be supportive and be exactly what and who you need. But if objectively overall you step back and you see the forest through the trees, and you recognize it's more relationship than relationship with a P, it might make it a little bit more manageable to let go. And it's just a simple let go. It's not drop it on the ground, step on it, dig your heels into it, bury it. It's just letting go. Yeah.
Thank you. Because when you do have those relationships as even just a point of comparison, so much clarity, much clarity, and then I get overwhelmed with gratitude for those people in my life. And then it really does help to weed the garden, because I see just these beautiful plants as a representation of like relationships that mean so much to me, that you're right. You're absolutely right. Now I'm like connecting dots now. The weeding of the garden does become a little bit easier. Yeah. Because you're literally making space for the relationships in your life that actually are balanced and reciprocal and equally giving from both sides.
And beautiful, and add beauty and value to your garden. And it's not, it's not about having a crowded, packed, full garden. Some of the most beautiful gardens are quite manicured and spaced out. It is not the quantity, it is the quality. And that's very much a mistake that's kind of made now, in the realm of social media, and especially with the youth, like how many followers do I have and how many likes did I get on this post? And that's been shown now in many a psychological study, for many, many years now. It's been reproduced that actually the number of followers and likes is inversely proportional to the sense of friendship and relationship and happiness.
Wow.
So it really truly is about quality, not quantity. So if it means letting go of a few so that you can tend to the beautiful roses and beautiful flowers of the garden, do it. And you can still do it with love. Again, like we talked, just like how we talked about, just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean that you have to invite them over for dinner. Right. Same thing too, on the opposite end of the spectrum, just because you're letting go of somebody, you can still do that with grace.
Yep.
Perhaps in your mind doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a personal confrontation with them. You don't even have to necessarily tell them. You can just slowly back away, but you can still even do that in letting go with grace and love. It doesn't have to be, with disdain and vitriol and resentment. Because again, resentment is just the poison that keeps circulating within you. So that's a part of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a part of letting go. You're just turning your attention to what better serves you, fulfills you, juices you, Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ignacio, for being the quality in my garden.
As you are as well. Thank you.
And to our listeners, like I said earlier, give this one another go. Give this one another listen. I'm going to.
Love you all.
We love you all. You want to bring us home? There are the giggles.
And remember, there's the giggles, full circle. And remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period. Love you.
Love you.
Bye.